It feels to me that the term superhero movie used to be a subgenre that could take on many forms. For example, Logan was a Western epic with superpowered characters at the core, but the tone was nothing like any of the other X-Men films of years past. Or the way that Constantine gave us a dark horror thriller with demons and monsters, but kept the detective/noir aesthetic and tone and allowed it to bleed through. But these days, it feels like nearly all of the caped cinema we've been getting fits into the same all-encompassing, mass-appealing mega-genre that has really started to feel the same across every film. With the rare exceptions of films like The Batman or Marvel's recent Werewolf by Night special, there's been a frustrating lack of variety in the tones of modern comic book movies. But back in 2011, Marvel was in the infancy of building out their now dominating connected universe by way of introducing different characters in their own films, before they all cross over into one giant blockbuster event with Marvel's Avengers. And with Iron Man already being 2 films in and Thor and the Hulk having been introduced in their own outings, it was time for Kevin Feige and the folks at Marvel Studios to wind the clocks back to 1942 and introduce audiences to one of the MCU's most iconic heroes in Captain America, the First Avenger. Now, if the Iron Man movies were a high-octane action romp, and Thor was a Shakespearean ode to the Renaissance era, and the Incredible Hulk was... I don't know. Something? Marvel Studios wanted to tell the story of Captain America in an adventurous trip to the past where we can meet the man who unknowingly made it possible for the Avengers to come together nearly 70 years later. The film offers a full origin story for Steve Rogers as the character and also brings in some history to help fill out the already established MCU, giving the entire connected universe a sense of lore and detail that connected these films even further. But by this time, Marvel's confidence in the success of their projects led them to use this movie as a way to dabble and experiment in the historic war epic genre. And in some ways, it works, and in other ways, it simply does not. But of course, the big question today is how does this movie stack up against the standards, or lack of them, in today's world of comic-riddled content? Let's find out in today's episode of Marvel Revisited. Alright, true believers, today we're digging out the star-spangled and action-packed Captain America, the First Avenger. The film follows a young man named Steve Rogers, played by Chris Evans in his most iconic role to date. Steve is a physically meek and inadequate New Yorker who wants nothing more than to serve his country in World War II. After multiple rejections to enlist due to his size and health, Steve's unrelenting patriotism lands him in a lab where the government injects him with super soldier serum, where Steve lands himself a job as America's mascot and the very first Avenger, Captain America.
You're an American hero.
Steve's heart and soul will be put to the test as he aims to break free from being just a figure of heroism and become an actual hero who can stand off against the Nazi Party's killing machine commander, the Red Skull.
They cut off one head. 2 more shall take its place. Hail Hydra.
Captain America was first introduced 80 years ago, almost to the day as of the making of this review, and was presented to readers in his very own comic book, Captain America #1, released in December of 1940. The character was created by Jack Kirby and Joe Simon and was meant to be a symbol of patriotism and American pride for the young children that it targeted. Given the time in America's history, with World War II being in swing and many of the country's teenagers being top candidates for the military, the character was destined for popularity from the very beginning. Hell, one of Cap's first appearances has an illustration of him decking Adolf Hitler square in the face, American style. This painted Cap as a strong, morally driven, and larger-than-life role model for young readers, which has since become a core aspect of the character in just about every iteration across just about every type of media. The character is also rooted in being a blonde-haired golden retriever come to life. So naturally, when it came time to bring Captain America into today's world, Marvel decided to hire Ryan Phillippe. Wait, no, it was John Krasinski. Wait, actually it was Jensen Ackles. Or was it Garrett Hedlund?
Well, it's a fair. I'm gonna try my luck.
That's who, Steve from Ohio?
Only joking, although all of those dudes were considered for the role, and many others were too. But Chris Evans' America's Sweetheart was ultimately cast as Steve Rogers. And no matter what anyone says about this movie, this was a very smart casting decision on Marvel's part. And not just because he already played Johnny Storm in 2 movies, but because he perfectly knows how to play this kind of character.
You know what? It's kind of growing on me.
Okay, so Steve's story is pretty standard as far as the superhero origin story goes. Much like Peter Parker, Billy Batson, Atlas, shout out to Austin McConnell, and many others, Steve is physically weak and also severely lacking basic coordination. But Steve's heart is much stronger than his body, and when he proves to the US military that he's their most qualified candidate for their new Super Soldier program, Steve is given the gift of a body that matches his ambition, and Captain America is born.
I thought he'd be taller.
But first, let's talk a little bit about this CGI Steve Rogers situation we got here. In order to make Evans look like a passable dork, a digital body replacement was used with Evans' head digitally rendered on a smaller frame. The result led to a character who, for the first act of the film, has a slightly uncanny and somewhat strange look to them. But in some scenes you can't really tell, and it does work for some stuff. But what is impressive is how they pulled it off. Instead of just using a smaller man to come in and act out the scenes, they digitally shrunk Evans' actual body and dimensions with a technique called plastic surgery. But they did have a body double on set for some scenes that required more convincing methods. And this required each scene to be shot at least 4 different times. But in the end, I guess it was probably worth it.
Is this a test? He's still skinny.
The movie also introduces Bucky Barnes, who we know as the Winter Soldier. However, in this movie, he's just a plain old handsome American soldier and best friends with Steve. In the comics, Bucky was a controversial character because he was just a young child originally meant to inspire younger audiences. So to avoid any such scandal with the film, Bucky's character was switched to being a friend who is the same age as Captain America and even originally a superior soldier. This change is very welcomed. In fact, I would say it's necessary, but the character of Bucky doesn't really do anything for me in this movie. He's just kind of there.
That little guy from Brooklyn who was too dumb not to run away from a fight. I'm following him.
Where the movie really kicks off is after Steve gets the serum. At first, he's more of a propaganda cheerleader for the US and kind of just used as a mascot to sell ammo and get kids to enlist. I find this a little bit strange of a thing because why would the government use their highly valuable, cutting-edge serum only to have the candidates stand on stage and just wear a colorful suit and wave at kids?
Series E defense bonds. Each one you buy is a bullet in the barrel of your best guy's gun.
Wouldn't it make more sense to give the serum to someone you planned on using for combat? Well, Steve certainly seems to think so, because he's starting to wonder if he took the right job and wants to get in the trenches and truly make a difference. And luckily, he's about to.
Finish your mission, Doctor, before the American finishes his.
Hugo Weaving as Red Skull sounds absolutely amazing on paper, right? Well, some folks also think it's a perfectly good translation from the page to the screen when we see Red Skull make his debut in the movie. Weaving has kind of the perfect face for something like this, with his sharp bone structure and thin face. And with the skin-tight latex mask glued to his head, he does indeed look very much like an imposing Nazi villain. Unfortunately, that's where the positives for this character end for me.
Is there something in particular you need?
I personally have never been the biggest fan of the Captain America comics. When it comes to the books I really get into, the adventures of the star-spangled superhero and his catalog of villains just didn't seem to appeal to me the way that something like X-Men does. So, as a result, I really just don't have the fondness for this character that I think it takes to really enjoy him in this movie. I just think he's bland. There are some really good action scenes throughout this movie though, with Chris Evans really breaking in his body for the future battles he'll have with the Avengers. I also can appreciate the cold and frosty feel of the final act, and I think it contrasts well against the sunny and warm settings of the MCU films before it. Also, for a lack of a better place to talk about it, here's just a few things that I also found entertaining. I really like the way that they worked in the traditional and fully comic book accurate suit for the big guy. I think that that's really nice, and I also like his actual suit. And I appreciate Tony's grandfather being there for a portion of the movie. Again, it just adds a little bit more of a lived-in quality to the MCU. And Steve's romance with Peggy is introduced here, only to be ended tragically and later distilled, convoluted, and made kind of weird by the time we get to the third Captain America movie. And of course, this is also the first MCU film to utilize the now iconic line, "I can do this all day," which does admittedly get me a little bit excited when I hear it in this movie.
Just don't know when to give up, do you?
I can do this all day.
Famously, the movie's ending is what allows this 1940s soldier to join the heroes of the modern day in the Avengers. When Steve finally has his final throwdown with Red Skull, he's able to save the day and prevent the death of millions by making one giant sacrifice and crashing Red Skull's ship into a glacier. Seemingly, this kills Steve, but when his body is found frozen 70 years later, he's thawed out and woken up in the modern day where Nick Fury is awaiting to recruit him.
You've been asleep, Cap, for almost 70 years.
Now, in general, this movie is a mixed bag for me. I love the modern look of Cap's suit. I dig the score by Alan Silvestri. I love the casting. I love the shield. The cinematography is pretty good, but there's also a lackluster villain, kind of a weak overall plot, and sadly, this movie, at times, is a little bit boring. But come on, this is Marvel in their heydays, so this movie did incredible numbers at the box office, making a total of $370 million globally by the end of its box office run. Critical reviews were generally favorable, with Roger Ebert praising the movie's performances, broad storyline, and set pieces, and Village Voice critic Kate Longworth disagreeing with him and calling it a hacky exercise in franchise transition.
Sign this!
But at the end of the day, it's all about what you think of the movie. So I'd recommend it if you're a fan of early MCU stuff or you're looking for a perfectly acceptable entry in the Captain America franchise. But one thing is for sure, we have plenty more Marvel movies to cover. So make sure you like, subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.
Hey! Let's hear it for Captain America!
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo remains an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.